how's it going? I'm Anali Jamal, and today I want to talk to you about how I like to spice up my chords by including seventh chords. So before we go further, I just want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what a regular chord is. And typically, you've probably heard of this term called a triad before, where if we look at a scale, say in the key of G, we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the root note. So if we're looking at this specific scale, if we hand-pick individual notes out of there, we could create the chord. And a triad is made up of the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, in this case it's going to be a major third, and then the fifth interval. So we have a triad. So right now we're actually playing it a little bit more melodically, and what I mean by that is we're not actually letting the notes ring out into each other. And that's actually what we want. Whenever we're playing chords, we oftentimes want them to ring into each other. So instead of playing the G chord like this, I might want to decide to play the third interval here on the A string, and then I might even want to play the fifth interval here on the D string. And that's how the chord is made. Now, when we're looking at this and incorporating the seventh note of this scale, so if we're looking at this, we have the first note, the third note, the fifth note. Let's keep going from the sixth to the seventh note. Now, if we incorporate this note in there as well with that G, it's going to sound a little bit different, right? And this is what I want to talk to you about here today by incorporating these seventh notes. Now, in the previous lesson I did talk a little bit more about this, how each interval of a scale has a specific chord attached to that. So if you did not check that out, I'd encourage you to check that out over there and make sure that you have a good understanding of this before moving on to this specific lesson. So now we're going to be working on the inside four strings, and what I mean by that is we're going to be working on just the strings 5, 4, 3, and 2. So we're not going to be focusing on the sixth string or the first string for now. We're going to be working more horizontally within what we can kind of figure out to be called inversions. Now, an inversion, as some of you may know, it's a different arrangement of the same notes. If I play this chord right here, it sounds really nice. But what happens if I wanted to play this in a different arrangement of notes? Maybe, for example, I wanted to have this note here as the lowest sounding note, because right now we have this C as the lowest. If we were to rearrange that, it would sound something like this. Way different, right? The feeling is still kind of in that C major realm, but the mood is a little bit different. You can think of this as the same emotion, but a different perspective of the emotion. That's how I like to look at it, because when you're trying to write your own music, I think it's very effective when you start looking at moods and how to create moods with specific inversions of chords, okay? Now, before we begin any further, I just want to make sure that you download the PDF that's in the description below to make sure that you have a good understanding and you're following with me to have a bird's eye view of all the chords that I'm going to be playing so you don't get confused. So we're going to start with the 4 inversions, starting with the C major 7. So the reason that there are 4 inversions is because there's 4 notes in the chord, right? We have the first interval, the major third, the fifth, and then the major 7. Because we have 4 notes, we're going to have 4 different arrangements of the inversions that we're going to be focusing on anyway. There's many ways of playing it, but we're going to be focusing on 4 of them. Okay, so the inside 4 strings, we have this shape right here, which is a 3, 5, 4, 5. The next shape is a little bit of a cluster chord. The notes are really close to each other, harmonically speaking, so it makes for a very interesting voicing. It almost sounds very sad, right? It has a bit of a sad overtone to it. And the way that I'm using this, I'm using here 7, 9, 5, and then here in the 8. The second inversion of the C major 7 chord that we're going to be working with is this right here. Okay, I'm using my pinky finger here on the 12th fret, index on the 9th fret. These 2 fingers here come up on the 10th fret. Again, inside 4 strings. Again, it's kind of a big stretch there with the pinky finger, but just practice it enough. You might find that lowering your thumb a little bit more will give you a little bit more reach with that pinky finger. I oftentimes see people do this, and then they wonder why their pinky finger can't go any further. So the lower the thumb is, typically the more range you can get with that pinky. It does wonders. Just that little tip alone can save you from holding chords comfortably versus not. Okay, from here, the third inversion is this right here. So here I'm just using 13 on the B string, 12, and then 14, 14. Okay, Okay, this is a chord shape that we're not going to be working with too much, but again, I just wanted to have you kind of introduced to this if you haven't played this before. All I would do at this point is kind of piece them together melodically with the B string note. Because the B string note is going to be the highest sounding note pitch-wise, you can kind of piece them together melodically like that. So you see I played an extra note there on the 7th fret of the B string. From there you can even go further with playing the 10th fret and then moving the pinky to the 12th to complete that next one. And you can go one step further to go to that 3rd inversion, okay? Already there we can go backwards too. So this is how I can maybe kind of piece things together more musically to still have the same inversions, but then to play different melodic notes to connect them together. This is very useful. All right, so these are the major 7 inversions. So whenever you see this, we're going to be working with these chords here. Let's talk about the B minor 7. Let's talk about the 4 minor 7 inversions. Now with this B minor 7 inversion, the first one, that's the one that we played earlier, which is a 2, 4, 2, 3, inside 4 strings. The next one is like this. It's a pretty big stretch. It's the pinky finger there on the 7, index finger on the 4th fret, and then ring finger here on the 7th fret of the D string, and then middle finger there on 5. Okay, now from this we're going to go into the next inversion, which is the pinky finger on 10, index finger here on 7, and then 9, 9 with the 3rd and the 2nd finger there. From here we got one more inversion, which is the pinky finger again moving, and then we're going to use the index finger there on the 11th fret, and then the other 2 fingers stack on top there on the 12th fret. Okay, so those are the minor 7th inversions. So right now we've gone over the major 7 inversions, minor 7 inversions, and now we're going to go over the dominant 7th inversions. So in D here, we're going to focus on the D7 chord right here as the first root position, which is just 5, 7, 5, 7. The next inversion is like this: 10, 7, 10, and then 9. Again, inside 4 strings. Next one is up here in the 13th fret. Again, notice that I'm using my pinky finger as my leading finger. Use that pinky finger to guide yourself there. Index finger on 11, and then middle and ring finger will stack on top on the 12th fret. Okay, so those are the dominant 7th shapes. Now, the way I like to do all my lessons is I like to start simple, and then eventually we're going to get into more complex playing. Example 1 is a very simple way of playing what we just did with some sort of right hand picking pattern. And what I'm doing here with this picking pattern, it's going to sound like this. Now, again, if you don't have the tab downloaded, make sure you download the tabs that are in the description below to have a very clear image of what I'm doing with the right hand picking pattern. Okay, so now we have this. Okay, that's the pattern that we're going to be working with the right hand. And if you're not quite sure how to do the slap technique here, I'm using my thumb, index, middle, and ring on the inside 4 strings and basically doing a hand slap. This is a technique that I use quite often, and it's taking your whole hand and making contact with all the strings. So if you don't quite have that technique down, don't worry about that. That will come, and you might just need to apply a little bit more pressure. Okay, so example 1 is going to be working with this chord here, the C major 7 right here, followed by the E minor 7 right here, followed by the B minor 7 in the 2nd position, and then to a D7. So this is the chord progression we're going to be working with. Now, if you're wondering what intervals these are in the actual diagram of like the chord and the mode relationship here, which I talked about in the previous lesson, this chord here is the 4 chord. It's the 4th chord on the key of G. If we're in the key of G, this is the 1st note, 2nd, 3rd, 4th note. And so that's why this is the 4th degree here. Okay, so we have 4 followed by 6 to the 3rd degree to the 5th degree. Okay, and that's it. So now if I do that same picking pattern with this same progression, it sounds like this. Okay, pretty cool, right? So now in example 2 though, I want to kind of emphasize different inversions. What I think would be way more effective and way more musical is to have musical variation. And what I mean by that is maybe the first time that you play this, you play it just like this that I just played. But the second time that you play it, we're going to play the same degrees, intervals, like the 4, 6, 2, 5, but in different inversions. Okay, so example 2, we're going to be working on the first inversion of the C major shape like this. This is a 7, 9, 5, 8. Okay? The second bar is going to go into an E minor 7, which is this shape right here. Now, if you're wondering why the C minor 7 is this shape, if we look at the minor 7 shapes, remember if you even look at the B minor 7 shape, it looks like this. I basically took that exact same shape and moved it down over here, imagining that the open strings are a fingered note, and that's why that E minor 7 looks like this. Okay, so that's bar 2. Bar 3, we're going to go into another inversion of the B7, which is like this. From the lowest notes to the highest notes, we have your 5, 7, 4, 7. Followed by this, we're going to go into a D7 inversion, which is this inversion right here. Okay, so this is the first inversion that we talked about in the D7. So here we have on the lowest string, 9, 10, 7, 10. Okay, so now playing this from the beginning to the end with that same groove on the right hand, we now have this. Okay, so now that we've got that down, let's look at the third example, which sounds like this. We're going to start with the C major 7 chord right here. This is pinky finger. This is on 12, 9, 10, 10. That's the first chord. The second chord is going to be this E minor 7 shape, which is probably the most common minor 7 shape here. Then we're going to go to the B minor 7, which is right here like this, followed by the D7 up here. Again, all these inversions are written in the tabs, so make sure that you're looking at that to get that bird's eye view of what I'm doing here. Okay, so if we were to play that same sort of rhythmic structure with the right hand, it would sound like this. Now again, with this one as well, if I wanted to do not this sort of groove-based pattern, but maybe something a little bit more sweet and melodic, okay, so using those little techniques can really spice up your chords to make them sound way more musical and way more exciting. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's see if we can play example 1, 2, and 3 back to back from the beginning to the end and see what that sounds like. Now this chord progression is the exact same thing all the way through. It's a 4-chord progression that we just changed the inversions every single time we would repeat it. And just by doing that, you see how much more movement we were able to create, but also think about harmonically speaking and movement-wise, we're kind of creating this database, this visualization in our head of all these different inversions when we need to go to them. Here I just talked about the inside 4 strings. I typically like to really use these as a starting base to get my students on par with understanding how these inversions work and how important they are to creating a little bit more of a musical sound. Okay, so if you enjoyed this lesson, I'd love to hear from you in the comments and how this sort of information has benefited you in your own playing. I do have the full version of this lesson at my Patreon page, where I have exclusive guitar lessons, monthly tabs, backing tracks, and behind the scene look into my life. So if you are interested in that, make sure to click the link in the description below to become a member today. Thanks again, and see you in the next lesson.